Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of Know Your Unit Fried Chicken Edition, aka Know Your Unit One Vision. So here's the thing, when it comes to Tactics Ogre, one of the more popular themed runs that people like to do as one of their earliest, challenge runs or just weird gimmick runs or whatever else, is going to be the Undead run. This originally started back in SNES where you could just go and talk to the skeletons, and PSP it was made quite a decent bit more difficult, where you would usually just be running around with a bunch of zombie octopi, and made a little bit of a comeback with the fact that you could talk to the zombies again in Reborn. But when it comes to One Vision, it's generally been the sort of king of undead representation. And alongside giving you a Necromancer in Chapter 1, we also have another undead commander class in the form of the Death Knight. So this is a fun class in both theme and design, but yeah, let's go ahead and get into it here. So this is going to be Diebold's unique class. For those that have never run into Diebold on the Chaos route, basically he is an undead commander trying to put together a team to go and take down Elmorka Castle because Nybeth is pissed that Chapter 1 happened. So in this particular instance, he is that version of himself, and you end up getting access to this class by going and beating him in that situation. Now, I believe Diebold actually joins as this class at this point. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think so. But in case you didn't have access to Diebold, you can still get this mark for either him or Denim through killing off the sub-commanders during that fight. So, for example, what's his face? The Hector, as well as the girls, if they end up getting taken out, they will drop Fiend marks, which are Death Knight marks. Okay, so what is this class? This is a combination of a bunch of different frontliner units, as well as being the sort of master recruiter of the game at this point, being able to have access to more recruit skills out of the box than absolutely anyone else, as far as I'm aware, as well as having... well, again, just an interesting combination of a lot of frontliner skills, but sort of half of a Necromancer, if that makes sense. So, first thing I want to point out here is check out them stats. So this is somebody that absolutely loves to have a balanced loadout. Their preference is towards strength, intelligence, and mind, slightly, but they are more or less balanced across the board, even up to and including the completely balanced attack and defense score over here. Innate ability-wise, it's nothing really to write home about, just a malediction for a ranged attack as well as a standard punch. Now, despite the fact that it lists this guy as 24 recovery time, which is nothing too unusual, this is a class that feels exceptionally slow. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but yeah, this dude feels slow as dirt, so just kind of bear that in mind. Now, let's go ahead and start off with skills here. So they start off with Necromancy as the first skill they're going to learn. I'm just going to go ahead and look over their spell list here real quick, because it's a very specific list. It's a very, very relatively small list. So I don't have Putrefy on him right now, but he does have access to Putrefy. We've got Life Force, Rebuild, Brainwright, Curse, Banish, as well as that other debuff ability I can't remember the name of right now, and a unique ability called Miasma. So the reason that these are relevant to anything, so Miasma is completely unique to them. You're gonna see a slow and poison effect off of that one. It only costs 20 MP. It's one of the best things that this class can have. So you get this thing from the Pirate's Graveyard, floor 12. So the On Holy Ground random battle. It only costs 20 MP, it only costs 20 RT, it's a fairly large area, and it's a locked-in 450 recovery time of slow and poison. So, incredibly good ability, very, very good ability there. Don't have it on this particular playthrough as of yet. I actually forgot to grab it when I was down there, but it is what it is. And here's the thing, though. They've got solid debuff abilities, they've got okay stats for it, but just like many fully balanced out classes, they're going to want a little bit of help. So personally, for running a sort of debuff-centric build, I like the idea of the Scorpion plus Bergenette combo here. Just basically light helmet plus crossbow. They very heavily rely on mind, but they don't necessarily innately have everything that they need to make that happen. So if you can boost that, you can kind of take that to the bank, as it were. So we're going to go full mind on this guy right now, maybe even swap this out for some heavy armor to make up for that vitality we just lost, and we'll go from there. Now, what's interesting is that despite the fact that this class has a relatively middle-of-the-road recovery time. I'm not sure why. It always feels super slow. Maybe it's their movement cost that's crazy expensive or something. Honestly, I don't know. Let me go take a quick peek over here at the OVR. Like, is there anything particularly special that makes this guy stick out as being so damn slow? Because to me, it feels like playing with the Terenius from PSP, where it's like, hey, look, this thing has so many cool potential ideas. Wait a minute, why is it that that I can't seem to ever get any of those ideas done because he's still taking a turn forever? So I'm not seeing anything particularly that sticks out as far as that goes. Let me see if I'm missing something here. Yeah, recovery time per tile moved is 5. They get slightly slower spell access to everybody else. So I really can't tell you why it is that this guy feels so freaking slow. Anyway, let's go ahead and get back to it then. So weapons-wise, they get access to an expanded list that, again, is a decent bit more than the standard Terenius here, with one-handed swords, two-handed swords, one-handed axes in particular, no two-handers here, all types of spears, one-handed hammers, as well as cudgels and crossbows. Now, interesting note on hammers that we'll probably cover more in the recruitment section later, but the coronal hammer. Now, unlike somebody like, let's say, a White Knight, they don't necessarily have the means to go and exercise something right away, but this is an interesting little synergy where something like a Holy Hammer combined with their recruit ability makes them very good at, let's say, whacking somebody upside the head and immediately recruiting them. Very similar to the Valk in something like Tactics Ogre Reborn. Anyway, let's continue on. So as far as augments are concerned, they get the usuals. Instead of, in terms of racials, they get everything except anatomy, as you'd expect. Parry, deflect, overpower. They get full access to rampart aura and counter hit, as well as bash. Standard access to clarity and efficacy, as well as wade and jump. And steadfast. They get half rank of field alchemy, as well as max DP, full ranks of tactician. Now, as far as skills go, they get access to double strike from the warrior, phalanx from the knight, check from the... which one are you? Hold on, let's double check that real quick, because I can't remember if this is Juggernaut or Hoplite. So Hoplite for check, Howl from the Cyclops here, as well as Shadow Resonance from the many that can go and learn that one. We get the standard access to wards here, both opportunity and trajectory for however you need them, absorb MP, which is pretty darn useful, squash from the warrior, as well as a couple others, and the more interesting thing down here is going to be entomb from the necromancer. So this means that they can basically take any of your units and put them into safe mode. Unlike the necromancer, they can't immediately bring them back at full health, but for example, using entomb allows them to save somebody that's about to get knocked out, and basically put them in a more or less invulnerable state. This is basically an improved version of Stasis from XCOM 2. So yeah, very solid ability. And that's this guy's whole thing. He's there to keep everybody more or less safe, to be a nice, gentle supporter to your undead units, as well as keeping everybody else as safe as he can, you know? He's doing his best. On top of that, when it comes to recruit abilities, he's got Recruit, Subdue, Coax, Tame, Demon's Pact, Master Undead, and Control Golem. So this dude is entirely just trying to build an army by himself, and that's pretty freaking cool as far as ideas go. Okay, equipment-wise, we've got access to pretty much the full complement of typical frontliner type of stuff equipment-wise, and we already talked about their weapons access over here. He's a particularly interesting use case for combat cudgels, being somebody that does have offensive spells while still having access to heavy armor. Though again, personally, I feel like he's better off leaning into the sort of mind department here. He does have ways to dedicate towards that. But yeah, just something to consider. Now, the thing about this guy is that he's not much to write home about on his own. He can do a lot, but he can't do it himself. And that's kind of what's fitting about his whole commander role here. He feels like he's 100% exactly the sort of like try-hard commander sort, and that feels awesome. There's a very particular vibe to this guy of just like the caring coach, you know? Now, the one thing to mention here is that any kind of undead-themed team is always going to have a massive issue when it comes to any kind of exorcism units. And that's where we're going to go ahead and bring in this approach right here. See, if you're in this position that you're running an undead team, you want to make sure that those exorcists are gone as quickly as possible. But a lot of flyers can also become undead. So what you can actually do is, let's say, have some griffins going out there. You have a necromancer backing this guy up to cover his lack in some certain categories, as well as having other flyers making up the team here. And so this means you can quickly immediately fly to the back row to get access to those clerics, but additionally you can then kind of circle back for everybody else once the one threat to this party is removed. So they're pretty darn good at this. Like I said, the unit by itself is not necessarily anything to write home about. In this particular case, he doesn't really have much in terms of skills for his crossbow here. He is fairly kind of middle across the board as he is right now. He's 5 levels behind because I kind of stopped using this class after a little while on this particular playthrough. But a fully undead team backed up by a necromancer does really allow this guy to shine, oftentimes allowing him to sort of serve the frontline role that the necromancer can't. Also serving the support role that a typical fighter can't, and typically allowing him enough access to different types of offense that any more dedicated attacker potentially wouldn't have. So, like, let's say in this case, I have a undead Fusilier Hawkman. His first aid doesn't really help very much here, but he is useful in that situation. We have 2 Griffins to go attack the other one here, and so let's say we use something like a Bloodbath to keep them all stocked up here to make sure that they last long enough to make this happen. They're easily going to be able to outspeed something like a basic Cleric. Oftentimes they can throw down enough offense that the Cleric is more preoccupied with going and supporting the enemy team rather than trying to keep themselves alive. So, or rather than trying to exercise stuff away. So that's useful there. Oftentimes, if they're feeling pressured, they'll go and attack, and ending in them getting counterattacked as well. But again, the thing to remember about these particular classes is that they're gonna have a little bit of a hard time, or rather about the Death Knight itself, is that he's not really an island by any means. He's a fun class to play around with, but definitely gonna have a good bit of lack as far as everything other than even their debuffs goes here. So, like, let's say with something like Curse, even fully dedicated to debuffs here, he's still got 0% odds on multiple units. Something like Brainwright is probably going to be a bit more likely, but even then, it's like, yeah, even then, in a lot of cases, he's just not landing it whatsoever. So, just bear in mind that, again, he's got the typical thing that happens when you're kind of average on stats across the board. He's going to have a little bit of a hard time putting those kind of stats into play, as it were. Going to have to put a little bit of extra work into it, but it's fine. It's fine. He's doing his best. He's certainly a class that's more about supporting and team building and, just being a good commander to your undead types rather than necessarily being super overpowered himself. So, it's a fun gimmick for a class. I really appreciate it. I think it's a hell of a lot of fun. This is like the linchpin for a lot of undead teams, so definitely feels solid for that one there. As far as things to remember when using it, though, so if you're running a fully undead team, remember that tanks aren't necessarily as useful. Typically, speed is going to be key there, seeing as even if something does end up getting completely... even if it does manage to come back, the more time you're spending on the ground, the more time you're potentially in a risky position. So essentially just dedicating yourself towards being able to use speed as much as possible is going to allow you to come back a lot safer, especially when using something like a Death Knight for keeping your people supported. So just again, remember that's a thing. He can't use Animate Dead, so try to have as much speed on your undead guys as possible. Stuff like Void Rings are especially good. Any kind of stuff that you can use to shut stuff down is going to be good. As far as tanking goes, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing right here, which is... okay, this is a weird synergy of a particular undead Swordmaster here. So what I'm doing with this guy is, again, specifically built around this dude right here. So he's going for a dual-wield build. He's going for Steel Stance in order to bait in attacks but be able to resist them. preempt is just kind of there because it's there. But equipment-wise, he's going for a basic sword and knockout fan combo, basically attempting to open up a unit to be able to hit them with a second attack, which is going to cause sleep here. It's not as reliable as a guaranteed knockout attack, but still, it's usually pretty good. Does a nice combination of typically bullying enemy units with a good amount of DPS and also having the ability to thoroughly knock them out. Finisher-wise, it does allow for things like potentially getting rid of MP or leaving somebody poisoned, so it's just a good amount of different tools in your tool belt here, while being reasonably tough enough with something like Steel Stance to the point that they're probably not getting taken out every time. Remember that there's sort of like a paratrooper mentality when it comes to your units like this, where oftentimes just being able to shut something down through sheer shock and awe is just going to be more useful than directly being able to tank or directly being able to hit particularly hard. Seeing as if you have enough movement here to be able to fully dismantle all the support that they've got running, it's like right here being able to bully clerics right from the get-go and just ignore everything else. This means that they do have potentially the means to just outlast everything else on the map. It's again just a fun way to play. So again, just sort of keep that in mind as a thing there. When it comes to the Death Knight himself, he typically wants to focus directly on support over absolutely anything else, so even if he's not necessarily the biggest powerhouse, that doesn't particularly matter. As long as everybody else is doing their job, he's doing his job. Let's say, even if he's not exactly performing very, very threateningly here, he is still a useful asset to the team here, as it were. It's like all I need him to do is to keep everybody rebuilt and in good shape and whatever else. So like, let's say right now that Griffin is currently leadened. That's not exactly going to work particularly well for us. So we'll just go ahead and rebuild him real quick. I mean, even clerics maxed out aren't able to heal 500 at one time, so that's all nice as well. Being able to put himself in the position to howl stuff into a stun state is pretty darn useful. A crossbow build allows for both of those debuffs to have a higher chance of landing, on top of being able to stun stuff wherever you need him to. Using these sort of bubble abilities to move a ranged unit into a kind of awkward position is something I personally really like doing. So, your mileage may vary, kind of just depends on how you prefer to play. But as far as I've seen it, it's a very reliable way to get stuff done. I'll just go ahead and speed through their turns here real quick. Unfortunately, now that guy's leadened. They really like leadening, these guys. They're trying really hard to keep them from flying. But that's fine. He ended up getting petrified there, which is fine, because then we have our classic entomb combo over here coming in from this dude. So let's go ahead and entomb right there. There we go. He's stilled, and we'll go ahead and animate him back to health. That's fun. All right. Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of the Death Knight in a nutshell. A unit that I probably should have leveled up before doing this whole thing, but I was actually planning to do a sort of mod showcase today, and then that ran into some technical difficulties, and yeah, that's just kind of where stuff landed today. All right. Anyways, so hopefully this is useful for you. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.